What advice would you give to a business owner or a business leader about how they set their business up for success so they can be better at recruiting and getting the right people through the front door of their business?
There's so many things, but the first thing that comes to mind for me and the most important thing is
how does a business become more appreciative of its people? What are the practical things that it does on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to demonstrate that appreciation?
Yeah, for sure. I think
where do you get your energy, your drive, and why are you so passionate about people? Did you fall into what you do, or where's that drive and energy come from?
Thank you for acknowledging that. It's very nice of you.
Welcome to episode 8 of The Life of a Business Leader. I am so excited about my guest today, who is Nebel Crowhurst. Nebel, before we get going, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited about having a conversation together.
So Nebel and I actually go back a long way, don't we? I was trying to work out before we came on today how long we'd known each other. It must be getting on for 2 decades, is it? Or a decade and a half, that's for sure.
Yeah, I reckon probably about 15 years.
Wow. And our title for today, People, an Investment or a Cost. Controversial title, as always, with The Life of a Business Leader. Nebel is a specialist in people. She's actually the Chief People Officer or / Chief Appreciation Officer. I'm sure you'll talk to us more about that in a moment for Reward Gateway. So, Nebel, do you want to just give a bit of context in terms of Reward Gateway and your background, which I think will really then help frame the conversation that we have today?
Yeah, of course. So I've spent the last couple of decades working in and around people and HR teams. Early career started in learning and development. So I've always had a real passion for how people grow in their careers. Worked for lots of different size and scale organisations, different industries. And most recently, coming up for a couple of years, been part of Reward Gateway. So Reward Gateway, for anyone that doesn't know, is an organisation that provides HR technology. So I'm an HR person in a HR business, which is a real privilege and gives me lots of different opportunities to get involved in the organisation more commercially than you would in some other industries. So we support HR teams globally with employee engagement solutions around employee benefits, communications and wellbeing. And it's a real privilege to be part of such a fantastic organisation that's been on a huge growth trajectory for the last few years. And certainly we continue to grow as we move forward.
And the one thing I love about the conversations you and I always have is your passion just oozes out. And I want to be provocative and controversial on the start of this episode because when I think about people strategy and in Built to Grow, I talked about, is it people strategy an investment or a cost? And most people talk about their people being one of the greatest assets that they have. But the reality is it doesn't play out that way. So, for example, you've already touched on it there. The function that looks after one of our best assets is called the Human Resources Department, which for me implies that human capital is just something that's designed to be moved around on the chessboard. And when you look at the P&L, people, which are supposed to be one of our greatest assets, sit in the overheads in the cost. So, Nebel, is there a disconnect in how businesses, on one hand, talk about people being their greatest assets, and then the reality of how it plays out culturally in a business? I'm really interested in your take on that to get us started.
Yeah, it's a good question and one that's probably got lots of different angles for us to think about. But certainly when you look at organisations, when they're perhaps in a position in which they're maybe struggling or looking in more detail at their costs, people is always the thing that gets scrutinised the most because it is the biggest cost that you have across your organisation. And you need to be as cost effective as you possibly can be. But of course, in the position that I'm in, I'm going to say that our people are an investment. And no organisation is what it is without the people within it and the work that they do and what they bring and what they deliver. I think the disconnect comes from not just the people themselves, but how we invest in those people. So the biggest challenge we probably find as HR or people leaders is when we're perhaps proposing a business case for investment into a people initiative that will in turn enable people in the organisation to be more effective, more productive. And the disconnect then from a financial viewpoint, which is, well, that's a cost, that's going to cost us money. How on earth are we going to be able to demonstrate the return on investment or the return on value on that? And so I think there's still a lot of work to be done where HR leaders are even more credible and able to correlate that link between people investment, improved employee engagement, and then business outcomes in terms of the business overall, with either revenue generation or cost saving overall. So I think the disconnect is more than just recognising that the people that you have within the business are an investment, but also how you invest in those people and the money that is spent through your people strategy to essentially enable the performance and the success of the business.
Interesting. So is it a double-edged sword then? Is it how HR stroke people leaders understand the business goals better, and therefore how they package up any investment in people that aligns to be able to clearly demonstrate return on investment or return on expectation? And is a second flip side of that, is there also something about the executive leadership team or the business owner or the board having people as a higher priority on the agenda? Because certainly a lot of the boards that I sit on, people is low down on the board agenda, whereas the boards that I sit on, it's number one. There's people and culture is the first agenda item. So is it a double-edged sword in terms of both from the people specialist, but also the business?
Yeah, I think so. And I think what's paramount is that there's a really strong relationship and connection between the chief people officer as well as the CEO and the CFO, and arguably the COO. So you need to build that relationship with those key people to have a kind of common ground on understanding the importance of the investment. And so then you're working together rather than against each other or trying to pull in opposite directions around where you see investment in the business. It's an interesting point you raise about where people sit on the agenda. Like I say, working for an organisation that is a HR business in terms of its product, I am quite fortunate in the way in which I work with our leadership team, and our CEO absolutely puts people at the top of the agenda. There's been far too many instances in my career where I've been in organisations when you're in a board meeting or a senior leadership meeting, and it's kind of like the footnote at the end. We've done all of the commercial conversation, and we'll give a token 30 minutes at the end of the agenda to have a quick chat about people. Yeah. Always left to the last minute and usually squeezed.
And that's my experience in a lot of scenarios. So a question for you. You've got titled Chief People Officer. Does that title, I use in inverted commas, buy you a seat at the top table, i.e., I always believe that your head of people should sit on the executive leadership team or board. Do you sit on the executive board of Reward Gateway?
Yeah, so I work in partnership with the rest of our C-suite. I'm going to challenge us a little bit there in our thinking. So I don't think the title is what buys you a seat at the table. I think showing up with credibility and commercial acumen is what buys you a seat at the table. So you could have any job title in the world. You've got to make sure that the way in which you're presenting information on the HR and people agenda is compelling enough for the rest of the C-suite to sit up and listen and realise its importance. So it's less about the title, whilst that's helpful. I think it's much more about how we as HR leaders show up and how we present ourselves. And we make sure that we're understanding the commerciality of the business and we work strategically. So I often have this discussion when we're in peer groups or communities, and there's this kind of demand for we should have a seat at the table. And I kind of say, well, actually, it's on us. It's on us to make sure we've got that seat so that we're seen to be credible and a vital part of the business's success.
And Nebel, one of the things that's always struck me, and you and I have spent hours talking about people, about business and so forth. I mean, I think you are unique in your mindset that you are so broad and have got that commercial mindset. Do you see that as still a failing in a lot of other people specialists, HR, that they don't think like you do in terms of the broader business and the actual results that the people strategy can and will deliver if you get it right?
Yeah, I think we've come a long way as a profession for sure. But I think there's an awful lot of HR practitioners that still work in the space of being quite a transactional, operational, reactive type HR support. And that's where we need to be much more progressive in the way that we work with our business leaders and across the organisation. There needs to be a strategic focus. Otherwise, how are we demonstrating our value? Of course, there's some core fundamentals of HR. Yes, of course, we have to make sure there are employment contracts, and we have to make sure we pay people properly, and we do things within legislation, and we follow tax rules. That goes without saying. But that's just the basics. To me, that's just your hygiene factors of core expectations. Beyond that, the things that you do that wrap around that make the biggest difference, that actually drive the performance of the business, that's where you really add value. And I think HR leaders that don't recognise that are missing out themselves, actually. It's a missed opportunity, not only for the business, but also for the HR profession.
So what's clear for me is that you earn your seat around the top table. That's the difference that I think I'm hearing you say. But there does have to be a recognition of the business that with the right person in that seat, that there should be a seat around the top table for people. If the business has got the culture right, if they're really embracing people strategy, because I still see a lot of businesses that actually the HR or people will report to the finance director or somebody else. So that's, I guess, where I come from with, yes, you might have to earn the seat, but there's got to be that opportunity as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a meeting in the middle of minds. And sometimes that can be harder than others. Whilst at the moment, I feel, like I've said, I'm quite fortunate. I'm in an environment in which people truly understand employee engagement and the impact it has on the business performance. But I've certainly worked in many environments where that's taken a whole heap of effort to really be quite tenacious and push forward to help the senior leadership team to see the impact.
Yeah, brilliant. I've got a key question where I want to take the conversation. This year particularly, so many clients, and this is in the smaller SME space as well, see so many frustrated business owners, senior business leaders who've got people challenges, and it feels like it's one step forward and then 3 steps back. What advice would you give to a business owner or a business leader about how they set their business up for success so they can be better at recruiting and getting the right people through the front door of their business? I know that's a massive question, but I'm really interested in your kind of spin on that.
There's so many things, but the first thing that comes to mind for me and the most important thing is employee voice and listening to people. I think it can be very easy, whether you're in a senior leadership role or actually even within HR, to make assumptions of what you think is right, what you think people need, what you believe will be the same for everybody else. And so what you absolutely have to do is have multiple mechanisms and different opportunities to gather employee voice and insight. So, you go back to that point about credibility and commercial acumen. Well, to be able to show credibility, I'm a true believer in evidence-based practice. So using data and insight to inform how you prioritize the things that you do as part of your people strategy. And the only way you can do that is gather information, whether that's from your existing employees, understanding what that demographic looks like, whether that's the different types of workforce, the different types of backgrounds that they come from, prospective employees, so candidates and what your candidate pool looks like, external insights, so what's going on in your marketplace, what's going on in our profession, what's going on in various industries. I mean, you have to build all that data and insight together to paint a picture, to then know what are the things that are going to have the biggest impact for your organisation. And what has the greatest impact for one organisation may be different to another. And so you can't make assumptions just because you've worked in one business or you've led or owned a certain organisation that the next business you work in is going to be identical, because the people within it and the work that is done will vary. So for me, it's absolutely about evidence-based practice. It's about data and insight informing your decision-making. And the bedrock of that is your employee voice.
Okay, so employee voice is one of the key things. What part does really being clear in terms of the culture, your vision, your values, all that key stuff play in attracting the right colleagues and employees through the front door of your business? Because I know certainly when I hear, Reed Hastings, Netflix and LinkedIn, some of the big leaders, they will always revert back to, I wish we'd spent more time in the early stages of our business's life defining the culture, because then we would have attracted probably a better caliber of individual. How big a part does that play in from your experience in Reward Gateway?
Yeah, I mean, what you're referring to there in its entirety is your employee value proposition. So your EVP is critical in how you position yourself in the market, how you then attract your people to join you, and how you then retain people and how you engage them whilst they're with you. And so your EVP is that culmination of a very clear articulation of what your organizational values are. For some businesses, you may be designing your values in the context of where you're at today. But for some organizations, they like to design values that are more aspirational of where they want to get to for the future. And you wrap that around with leadership behaviors, with the various benefits that you offer, what kind of pay employer you are. All of those components create your overall EVP to attract people, the right kinds of people that are going to help drive your business forward. And I think today in the workplace and the expectations that employees have of employers, your EVP and your total kind of proposition that you put in place is so important, because expectations are getting greater and greater. People expect so much more from their employers. We're no longer in a world of I get my pay and I get my pension and I do my 9 till 5.
Yeah.
Employees expect employers to do so much more around overall well-being, and not only physical well-being, but emotional, financial, mental well-being, and sometimes not just for the employee, that can extend out to the family. So the things that you need to do to support people are paramount, because in turn, if those people that are within your business are supported as well as possible through your EVP and through the culture and the environment that you create, they're going to thrive. They're going to be more resilient. They're going to be able to perform better. So there again, you go back to the point of it being an investment. You invest in these people, they're going to do more for the business in the long run, and you're going to see greater success.
So this all sounds great if you're a big organization. So I'm going to be controversial now. If you're a small business owner, you might think about EVP and some of the stuff you're talking about and go, oh my God, where do I start? That just sounds like, so is that just big business focus? What would be your answer to those individuals?
Yeah, definitely not. I think, of course, in big business, you might argue that there's more budget, more resource, but there's nothing to say you can't work on these things. A lot of the cultural elements really come from sort of leadership top down, how leaders show up, the types of behaviors and attributes that you expect from people are role modeled by leaders. That doesn't cost anything. That's a group of people that need to think carefully about how they show up, how they behave. And I know over the years we've spoken lots about this, but you know how much I advocate and believe in the principles of emotional intelligence in leaders. And so some people have high levels of self-awareness and emotional intelligence around how they show up as a leader, and some don't. And so, focusing on some of those things to help educate and progress how leaders show up so that they are in a position to be able to form what a culture looks like within a business doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot of money. I've worked in very, very large, 100,000 people organizations and much smaller businesses. And actually at Reward Gateway, we're small but mighty. We're global in terms of what we do to support organizations. But in terms of the size of our business, we're not massive in terms of headcount, but we're able to do these things because we've got people in the business that feel very passionately about creating a fantastic culture.
And is there a direct correlation to getting your EVP right and ultimately your retention of people and then subsequently your business growth? Is there a proven formula that if you get that right, then A will equal B, or what's your take on that?
I love that you've asked me that question, because that gives me a perfect segue into our recent research that we've done.
Just to say, that wasn't planned to do that, but I'm glad it has done, because it doesn't surprise me what you do with Reward Gateway. So yeah, great. There's a link there, because I'm really interested in your take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, within Reward Gateway, we often conduct, research studies. It's something we've often done. So hence my point around evidence-based practice, and you want to use data and insights to inform how you prioritise. In this last year or so, we've conducted an economic value study. So looking at the economic value that HR has on organisations. And I'm so proud of this piece of work that's been done by the business. And also I feel really excited by it, because actually there is very little, if any, proper evidence that correlates the link. We all know it. We kind of just know it, but we don't have the true correlation. So what our economic value study has done is it's kind of unquestionably quantified the link between, actually, we go back to that point around my job title, appreciation in an organisation, and what appreciation is around, appreciating people for who they are and not just the work they do, which then links into increases in employee engagement, which then links into business performance. And what we've been able to see is that those organisations that truly appreciate people have a greater result in their employee engagement, have between 5 and 7% increase in business performance.
Wow.
So when you think about that, and you think about what is your total annual revenue for your organisation, put another 5 to 7% on that, and that's a significant amount of income. You go back to that conversation that says, oh, well, sometimes it's hard to get investment for people initiatives. Or if you're able to go to your board and say, well, actually, these people initiatives contribute to a 5 to 7% uplift in business performance, that's when you start to become more credible.
And that's why I've just got the trigger now about why your title is Chief People Officer / Chief Appreciation Officer. So that absolutely, I'm taking it links in with the report and the kind of that you've done recently.
Yeah. And I'll share a story with you. So this started probably a year or so ago. So we were over in Vegas. So SHRM, which is like the US version of the CIPD, hosts their big annual conference. And we went over for that. And I was over there with our CEO and our CMO and a group of our team. And of course, we had a stand and we did, all the great things that you do at these conferences and expos. And our CMO at the time hadn't long been in the business. And actually, this is the first business that he's worked in as a HR organisation. And he is incredibly commercially minded and very data driven. And he simply could not comprehend how little evidence-based practice was taking place in the HR profession from all the things that he saw and observed at this event. And we sat and had a drink in the evening after the sort of day one of the conference and battered around thoughts and ideas. And he was like, I don't get it. How's anyone achieving anything in HR when you haven't got any kind of data or evidence behind you? And I was like, let me tell you, some of us are trying to do this, but it's a real challenge. And so that conversation was what was the catalyst to us internally doing the piece of work with Mark, our CMO, really pioneering how we produced the study with the marketing team in partnership with the people team, so that we could have something really tangible and really clear with the correlation between the two. So it's been a really exciting journey and a brilliant project for us to work on. And it's ongoing. So we're not going to stop gathering data for this particular economic value study. We're going to keep gathering data to help reinforce that message even further and help HR leaders across the world demonstrate the value that they add in their businesses.
And is that economic report, is that out in the wider marketplace now? Can anybody get that?
Yeah, sure. We can. I'm assuming we can share a link, perhaps.
Yeah, no, if you should send us a link, because I think it'd be really interesting, because I think that correlation between, so was it appreciation, engagement, and then a 5 to 7% uplift in business performance?
Yeah.
I like a good formula. So there's a formula. And when you talk about appreciation, let's make this real for our listeners. How does a business become more appreciative of its people? What are the practical things that it does on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to demonstrate that appreciation?
Yeah, for sure. I think, in the first instance, people say, well, we always appreciate our people. We say thank you. And that's lovely. That's a good start, right? It's nice that you say thank you to your people. And businesses, I'm sure, will talk about recognition. And many businesses will, I'm sure, have recognition programs or reward programs, all fantastic. But to truly appreciate people, it's much more about who they are rather than what they do. And so when you look at the economic value study, what we've created is a total employee experience pyramid. So it's a layer of things that you need to think about across your business that help to achieve the pinnacle of the pyramid, which is an appreciation culture. It's rooted in Maslow, right? So in some respects, this has been around a long time, but Maslow's theory is absolutely spot on. You have to get the core fundamentals in order. You have to have a strong foundation, a strong basis to build on. So we start at the bottom of the pyramid with paying people fairly, supporting people with how they make their money go further with financial education. You build up the pyramid into well-being, and we think holistically about well-being, not just the odd exercise class or a gym pass here and there. We build in further up the pyramid when we think about communication, connection, belonging. That's an absolutely critical part of the pyramid. If people feel like they're connected and they belong and they're recognised for the great stuff that they do in the business, and it's connected into them and what they need in terms of their motivators. You move up further through the pyramid and you think about reward, learning and development, how you incentivize people. And then at the pinnacle, if you've got all of those different aspects built up in the right way, essentially through your people strategy, you're more likely to close what we call the appreciation gap. and get to a place where people feel appreciated, and an organisation where people can self-actualise and they truly thrive and they truly grow, and they have joy in the work that they do. It's a very short version of the pyramid.
No, I love it. But that's in the report that people will be able to see, because that's something tangible that people off the back of our conversation now could actually take and start to think about how they personalize that and apply it to their business.
Totally. Yeah. It's all really practical.
Well, my passion for making sure that people go away from kind of these kind of conversations, particularly you and I have, where they can go, actually, I can take that. It's tangible. I can go and do something with it. I'm going to be slightly controversial now, because off the back of COVID, and I get the whole appreciation bit, and this is where in my lens as a business owner now, at what point does the line cross between being appreciative, but there's an entitlement culture that exists in the marketplace? I can see you smiling at this. So I think there's a real tension at the moment between getting your employee value proposition right, but where does the weighting sit in terms of the employer versus the employee, and making sure that it's equally balanced? And whilst we appreciate our colleagues and employees, that there isn't that entitlement culture that I hear so many business leaders talk about that's creeping into their businesses.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a bit of human nature, isn't it? The more you give, the more people want and expect, And the world that we're in today, like we said before, we're more and more demanding than we've ever been before. I think what's interesting here is it's about how you get the right blend of the things that you provide to people in terms of support or benefits. So again, I'll refer back to the recent research we've done, because it is so compelling and it's so recent. When we look at the results of all the organisations that have contributed to the economic value study, we see kind of 4 organisational personas. And of course, the organisations that are achieving the 5 to 7% increase in business performance are our kind of leader organisations. But we also have a category called appeasers. And the appeaser organisations tend to be the ones that kind of just throw anything and everything at everyone and just hope for the best, almost too much. And it's not necessarily the right things. So what you need is a well thought out strategy, because if you get the balance right and you provide the right benefits and the right wellbeing support for the people in your business, go back to my point around employee voice, listen to what people need, understand your workforce, know that you might need a different strategy for frontline workers versus desk-based workers. Appreciate that, you might have a varying demographic of people that might need different things at different times in their employee life cycle or at the point in time they are in their life. So I think the only way around it is getting the right balance, being comfortable to test and learn, also being comfortable to realise that certain things that you're maybe doing don't have the right impact. So stop them and reinvest what you're doing in one place into something else. Now, are you going to make everybody happy all of the time? Probably not. But what you can do is make sure you're having the most amount of impact for the biggest proportion of people, so that you're making as much of a positive drive to the overall culture of the business.
Good answer. You're on it today, Nebel. Another question. What part does, some people call it induction. I'd rather call it climatization. And the challenge sometimes is you are so happy to have recruited somebody that you throw them into the scene. You want them to be delivering results tomorrow. What weighting and importance do you place on actually, as a leader, as a business, holding back? Make sure you do the induction and climatization phase right, and recognizing that if you do that, it will pay you back dividends further down the line, because then the individual will hit the ground running. And do you see that? Do you see that as a problem in terms of businesses just throwing people into the deep end and not doing that induction climatization correctly?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's not just about throwing people in, it's just not allowing them time to adjust into a new world. So induction, acclimatization, onboarding, we probably refer to it as onboarding, however we want to refer to it. It's that period of time to enable somebody to step through. So I think in every single business I've worked in, onboarding is a never-ending project. It doesn't stop. So I think the most important thing is that you don't put onboarding as one of your kind of deliverables for 2024 in your strategy and then go, tick, we've done it. It needs to be one of those things that is continuously reviewed, and it's reviewed in partnership with the business. it can't be something that's delivered solely by the people team, and it can't be something delivered solely by either the hiring manager or the area leader. It's a blend of the two, because your responsibility in those first few weeks and months is not only about bringing someone up to speed in the job requirements, but it's making sure that they feel like they belong, they fit in, they've found their home, that it works for them. I think one of the other things that we get wrong with onboarding is we think we need to tell everybody everything in their first few weeks. They're not going to remember it all, not possibly. And so it's thinking smarter about how you drip feed information, or you provide people with the signposting to where they find information so that it's available to them at the point of need, rather than it being something you just get given in your first week. It's things like oodles of policies. Who needs the expenses policy in week 1? They probably need the expenses policy in month 3, when the first time they've claimed something. So as long as they know where to find it, rather than knowing the intricacies of it. So it's a huge part of success, and it's a huge contributor then to your long-term retention. If you're losing people at a higher volume in the first 6 months than people that have reached maybe 2 to 3 years plus, then you're doing something wrong in your onboarding.
And that's going to be my next question. Is there any direct correlation between getting your onboarding right and your retention? And are there any red flags that you would put in place at the 3, 6, 9, 12-month mark with clients to get them to recognize whether they're doing that well or not?
Yeah, and it is kind of what I've mentioned. So it's analysing your labour turnover. So not just looking at labour turnover as a whole, but looking at your labour turnover at some key milestones. And again, that might vary dependent on your type of business. You might consider your time to productivity for somebody, and when they've first joined, is 3 months. For others, it might be 6 months. So put your line in the sand of where you see someone being able to stand on their own 2 feet. And if your labour turnover is higher for that first period of time, or significantly more than you want it to be, then that's your data source and your data input to understand that perhaps something needs to be done different. You should also be conducting things like new starter interviews and gathering that kind of feedback as well. So it's that blend of numbers-based data and your anecdotal data, so qualitative and quantitative mixed together to help you understand whether you've got an issue.
And switching the focus slightly, I note that you were recognised as HR Magazine's most influential practitioner for 21, 22 and 23. What makes Nebel tick? Where do you get your energy, your drive, and why are you so passionate about people? Did you fall into what you do, or where's that drive and energy come from?
Thank you for acknowledging that. It's very nice of you. I feel hugely passionate about what I do. I kind of did fall into it. Don't most HR people? Like I mentioned earlier, I started in learning and development, so I've always had more of a kind of lean towards enabling people to be in a position where they can thrive. And I suppose that's why then I've got a real passion for kind of overall employee experience and the impact that you can have. But there's nothing better. There's nothing better than working with either individuals or teams of people or overall organisations and knowing that the stuff that you've done has helped them be more successful. And I'm quite happy to be sometimes in the background of that. You don't always have to be kind of front and centre of that. You know that the stuff that you've done has helped someone have a better day, a better week, a better year. And so, yeah, to me, it's what I kind of live for. And it's lovely to be recognised by HR Magazine. And when you look at the criteria as to why you're recognised, it's not just about the job that you do in your day-to-day, it's what you do for your wider profession and how you support beyond the organisation that you're in. So, and I think there's a double benefit there. So if we all step up and out of our businesses and we collaborate and communicate and knowledge share with each other in the profession, we can gain so much more. So I love to be able to connect with people. I love to share what I'm up to. That might help someone else. And I love to hear what other people are up to because that can help me. So, it's just, I feel very fortunate that I found my place in life. I love it.
But your passion oozes out of you, and you are authentically the conversation. You can just tell that this is, you live, breathe, eat and sleep this every single day. And of course, I've had the privilege of knowing you for a long time and seeing you grow and develop into these roles. And it's phenomenal to see. If people wanted to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Oh, as always, LinkedIn, because we're all on LinkedIn. The LinkedIn's probably the best place. Not so much on X these days, but certainly LinkedIn. And follow Reward Gateway as well, because I do a lot of stuff to support. We do an awful lot of thought partnership across Reward Gateway that the team does, but I often get involved. So whether that's webinars, conference events, interesting papers, research reports. So follow RG and follow me on LinkedIn. So that's the easiest place to connect with me.
Brilliant. And one final question, which I always like to ask, is particularly on this subject of people and investment or a cost. If there was one piece of advice that you were going to share with somebody about how they could really build a robust people strategy and get it right, what would that kind of key golden nugget be?
Evidence-based practice.
Oh, you were really quick with that one.
That otherwise, you don't know. How do you know what the right thing is to do without gathering the insight? So employee voice and evidence-based practice helps you to prioritize.
Love it. I'm sure we could have talked for hours. As always, I really appreciate you coming on The Life of Business Leader today. We want to make it really practical. I think you've given some real golden nuggets that people will be able to take away. So from me, a massive thank you.
Thank you. Loved it. Thank you.
And for all those listening, if you want to get more of The Life of Business Leader, make sure you subscribe and are following the podcast series. And if you like it, share it so that you've got colleagues who can also benefit from The Life of a Business Leader, just like you are doing. From me, your host, until next time, goodbye for now.